that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, I need a weapon, and welcome back to the Halo Expanded Universe. We are so very close to the end. After this, I have Rubicon Protocol, Halo Infinite, and its multiplayer, Epitaph, and then we're past February already, but as of February 2025 there should be a new Halo novel coming out. But outside of that, I have read the entirety of the Halo EU. Today I have for you Halo Outcasts, the final novel so far by Troy Denning. So, I know I was rather negative in my Divine Win video, which was also by Troy Denning, or at least neutral. I don't know if I didn't say I hated it or anything. This basically addressed everything that I said. For one, the created conflict may not be the main plot point of this story, but the catalyst for the story has everything to do with Halo 5. This is instantly more what I was looking for than the previous story was. This actually, instead of just a one-off mention, this is heavily involved with all Cortana conflict and all that as it leads into this other story on this planet. Another thing about this story, which retroactively makes another story less kinda is Halo Oblivion. Now, those are also by Troy Denning, and it makes this story a little less impressive in terms of continuity, because, I mean, in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, you have a story like this by a completely different author who decided to pick up some trails and continue a story, right? But here, I mean, it's still cool, but it's Troy Denning wrote all these, so he has continuity between his own stories, which isn't nearly as impressive. However, I mean, if you're reading this in chronological order like I did, then you read Oblivion a long time ago, because Oblivion happens before any of the games, because, it happens when John and all Blue Team are still like 15 years old, so it's because Troy Denning wrote two Master Chief books that took place during the Covenant War, pretty early on. So this was one of them, where Master Chief and Blue Team are stuck on this planet called Nethrop, which comes back in the story. So, but the other great thing about this book, this other phenomenal thing about this book, is that it focuses mainly on the Arbiter, who has had some cameo appearances, but has not had a main role in any Halo story, novel or game-wise, since Halo 3 was the last time he truly mattered, and even then, Halo 3 shafted him to the sidelines. The last time Arbiter truly, utterly mattered and had huge speaking roles was Halo 2. So it's been a long time. That being said, it does a phenomenal job with him. I could hear Keith David and all the lines that Thalvadam had. I give a slight spoiler to this joke made because I think it's really cool, in a sense. I'm not giving any plot points for this part of it because it's a non-spoiler, but this lady at some point talks to the Arbiter, because they're being very vague about Cortana. They keep referring to her as she, this ominous threat, and so this lady asks, like, "What are you talking about? You talking about Sauron? Like Sauron?" And Arbiter contemplates this in the back of his mind while they're talking and thinking, what is Sauron? Is this some other threat that humanity unleashed long before Cortana that we should also worry about? Which is really funny, of course, which I'm glad to know Tolkien's work has lasted this far into the future, but also that now the Arbiter, instead of realizing the base story that Lord of the Rings is, now thinks that there is some sort of threat called Sauron out there. It was mostly played for laughs, but it's still just really funny um, that happened. Um, though I do think if the Arbiter ever got the free time to watch those films or read those books, I think he'd be a rather big fan of them. Now, there is some things with the precursors that are interesting in this story. Will it go anywhere? Not exactly sure. Um, I don't want to. I don't want to be too. I want to be a bit vague about this story, but it does involve uh, the created and the guardians, and kind of the whole reason for this mission to Nethrop is because of the guardians. And without spoilers, can't really get into it. But again, vastly more in keeping with the events of Halo 5 and actually like using that to drive a plot that I appreciate. Even though, of course, Cortana and the created aren't like a huge part of the story, they're still included, so I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, without getting into spoilers, I really enjoyed it. It is much better than I think the Ferret trilogy is, and I would recommend it to, especially if you're an Arbiter fan. I would read this story. Does it amount much in the games? So far, as of Halo Infinite, no. But that's par for the course with 343. But of course, at the time of recording this, 343 is no longer in control. It's now Halo Studios. So we shall see um, how that fares moving forward. But one thing I'll say as a fan personally, because I know a lot of Halo fans are this kind of incessant need to be like, stop with books, like just make good games. And there's truth to that, but also like, no, don't stop making books. Keep making books, please, please, please. But just make good games too. Like there's no need to stop making books. Because people are like, oh, this lore shouldn't be in a book, but not every story demands a video game. It just doesn't. And a novel's gonna be quicker to push out than a video game's gonna take to come out, you know? So you can get more stories in a universe you love, more lore, more characters to love that maybe you don't see in the games, you know? That's the whole point of expanding a universe. Again, I do think the problem with this era of the Halo EU is that none of them matter to the games, and that it feels very corporate, and that whatever you may learn of interest in these novels ultimately don't amount to anything. And I think that's the most disappointing thing. But that's part of the problem, right? I mean, people complained way back when the rookie died. Now, I have complaints about how that was handled, but the idea of killing somebody off in a book doesn't bother me because it gives me a reason to pay my money for a book. Otherwise, why am I wasting my time reading a story that ultimately amounts to nothing, right? Some things have to matter in the books. It shouldn't be something so crucial that you would understand a base game with it, but it can be something that if you had read it and then played the game, you get vastly more out of it. That's the balance. You have to be able to make a game where nobody feels like they're missing anything if they don't read a book. But if they do read a book, then it becomes so much more than it initially was. That's how you go about that. And if someone's too lazy or or competent enough to read a book, then they can listen to a YouTube video about it, or listen to Audible or something. You know, there's a balance to be made there. You definitely shouldn't have all of your story and lore rest on a book. That's ridiculous. However, you also don't need to give up on books either. Books are a great avenue to tell stories, and they're cheaper, so why not? Um, don't stop making books. Too many people are becoming non-readers these days, and that's bad. It's good to read. Not everybody needs to. It's a hobby. But literature has existed for a long time. It shouldn't go away. Maybe this will be dated. And in 2060, no one will be reading. I don't know. But I'm not giving up on reading yet. And I don't think you should either. It's coming from a guy who will spend hours in Skyrim, or Oblivion, or Morrowind, or Elder Scrolls Online. Won't even be playing the game. I'll just be reading. And I'm not playing the game, you know? So, um, yeah. I just want to give a little thing there, just because, like, it's a really incessant thing I hear. Every time I watch, like, a Halo lore video, people keep complaining that it's in books and not in a video game. And there's a balance to be made. But you don't need to stop writing books in order to. But you also can't just, like, have it be, like, pointless shit, you know? Like, you can't just, like, go, like, oh, all the lore's in the video games, and then nothing happens in the books, because then you just have the opposite problem. Then people are going to stop buying the books because they don't matter, you know? Why write books if why pay for it if it amounts to nothing? That's kind of like what the Star Wars Disney canon books are doing right now, where they will make like little character pieces. Or like, you want to know more about this character from the video game or this TV show, then you read this book. But they can't do anything because the mandate is if it's important, it will happen in a video game, it'll happen in a show, it'll happen in a movie. Therefore, everything supplemental like a book ultimately amounts to nothing. So then why even bother? So don't do that, Halo. Be better than that. Find a good, equal balance. Thank you. But yeah, definitely read this book. It's well worth your time. I'm getting spoilers. Cortana, within the very first page of this story, the tyrant blew up Doisak, the brute homeworld, Harley. So we hear about this for the first time in Halo Infinite publication wise. This novel was released after Halo Infinite came out. But chronologically, it's before because it happens after Cortana blows up Doisak, which is really interesting. But as we see, um, there's armatures all over St. Helios because they're looking for someone. Because the whole plot point of this story basically is that there is basically like a research student um, who has possibly discovered a place where they created some sort of weapon that managed to down a guardian long in the past. Now, if that's possible, then that is a big thing that, of course, Cortana is going to want to stop because the guardians are her big end all win all. Sure, like she has a lot of allies in terms of AI, but the ultimate thing keeping everyone in line is those guardians. So if someone figures out a way to destroy those guardians, that ruins the power she kind of holds right now. So of course UNSC wants it. Of course the Sangheili want it, and the Banished want it. That's kind of the whole conflict of interest there. So the whole story kind of leads us to Nethrop, but the entire purpose of leading us there was because of Cortana and the events of Halo 5. So vastly more interconnected to the plot point of the games, which I appreciate. I don't care if Halo 5 was bad. I don't care if the story made some mistakes. Stick with what you sow and make something good out of it. And I think Troy Denning, not that he wrote Halo 5 or anything, but he takes what was in Halo 5 and makes it work a little bit better. Again, the Ferret trilogy feels so disconnected from what's going on in the actual plot of the story in the wider universe that it feels, you know, there's a paragraph mention of Cortana in Divine Wind, but if you cut that out, you'd have no idea necessarily that this is taking place during the created conflict era. Like, that's the thing that's so annoying about it because they were so afraid of fans getting so mad at Halo 5 that they didn't bother to. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, if you want to go a new direction with the book or with the games, sure, go for it. But you flesh it out in the books and retroactively make it okay. That's the whole point of expanded universe. But they never really did that. And they probably never will now. You know, they're going to try to move forward with this new stories and not deal with it. But yeah, anyway. So I appreciate it a lot more because the story is intricately more involved with the plot point of Halo 5. Because, again, Cortana's in control of everything. So why is it only casually mentioned a few times in previous stories? Here is sort of a central focus. Also, um, the Arbiter has this grand idea of an alliance of interstellar civilizations. It's a passing thought he has. It's not something he thinks that's actually attainable. But he thinks, this is like the way moving forward, or how to defeat bigger threats like the Created or the Flood or anything would be to stop fighting and have all different species actually work together, in harmony. Um, we also in this book have Olympia Vale come back. She was, of course, one of the Spartans from Halo 5. She was kind of whatever in that story. Here, she actually becomes a character. We get a bit more backstory to her. We learn that her father was a Spartan 2 reject. He ran away from the project, made it out okay. We learn a bit more of her friendships with the lady who found out about this potential weapon. So Olympia just very much becomes more of a human being in this story, which was very nice. Also, for some perspective, in terms of chronology, Oblivion of Halo happened 33 years ago. And 10 years before Vale was even born. And of course, Atros is looking for this weapon. Ugh. Arbiter makes it to the planet and talks to Petrov. If you remember, Petrov was in the story of Oblivion, and she wanted to leave the little kids on that planet in favor of her soldiers making it back home, which ended up not happening. But there's really good interactions between Arbiter and Petrov, and really fun conversations. There's also this nice little comment, because Arbiter's trying to explain to her that the war's over and it's been over, and he thinks to himself, like, why does he try so hard with humans and try to make things work out? And he says to atone for his sins, basically. He doesn't say his sins, but the Arbiter feels in his bones, there's almost this compulsion in him that he must make peace with as much humans as possible, because he is the reason that so many died. And knowing that he killed all those innocents for a lie eats at him still to this day, which is why he tries his hardest to not have any hostilities with the humans, though he's smart enough to realize, just like on his own planet, because unlike Star Wars, it's not a homogeny. There are different factions and different wants and needs of the people. He knows that there are people who've been trying to backstab him, i.e., the Karen Travis trilogy. But he also recognizes that that's not all humans. There are factions who don't want to get along with him, but there are also plenty of factions that genuinely want to coexist in peace. And those are the factions he gives a damn about and treats as the whole collective, ultimately. Because how is he really to judge after all the destruction he caused and his peers? He can't. So I just really appreciate it. It's a small moment, but it just speaks volumes to him. He also has the patience of a saint, might I add, with the amount of things that go on in this book. Nizat. Do we remember Nizat, guys? Well, Nizat is back. I don't have much to say about him, but it was cool. Again, if you're reading these publication-wise, it's not that far apart. But if you're reading chronological order like I did, it's been a long time since you've heard that name. And I already mentioned the Sauron joke in the non-spoiler, so I'm not going to redo that. And, there's a lot of fights and stuff, and I don't have too much to say about all that stuff, but we do have Rosa also come to this plot point. Rosa was a little girl in Oblivion, and she got rescued off the planet, and now she's also like a scientist lady, but she has these voices in her head. This will matter for kind of the ending, sort of. But so she's hearing these things, but she's around. And then there's this really awesome scene between Aatrox and the Arbiter. Not that it will amount to anything, but still, it was cool that they interacted and to know that they interacted. Um, but Aatrox gets um, the weapon that they were looking for and gets away. There's also this weird thing about dust, this pure dust. Now, if you remember Greg Bear's Forerunner trilogy, the dust is what became the flood. Of course, it was a corrupted version of the dust. It's just normal dust. What does that exactly mean? Um, I'm not exactly sure. There may be some speculation that it could give, like, the Banished or Aatrox more like durability, which is why he could endure more than he does naturally. I'm not exactly sure. But, I don't know. What I do know is that they must have used this weapon because in Halo Infinite, there's a part of the map where there is, in fact, a downed Guardian. So they clearly found a way to destroy one. So, i.e., this book. Um, then, there's a sort of epilogue adjudicant thing at the end of this, and there's no exact time placement. I may leave a link in the video, if not outright show you what Hidden Xperia had to say on the matter. Um, Regardless, I'll leave a link in the description, whether or not I actually show in this video or not. But it's very cryptic and vague. But there are these voices again in the past. I assume it's the past. And they're talking, and it sounds very much like the Flood, or the precursors themselves. Which seems to suggest, because that girl from Oblivion is hearing them now in the present, same as this ancient human is hearing it in the past. So, are there an uncorrupted version of the precursors, non-flood, that are in some way, shape, or form still around today, influencing events? And something that got my mind kind of turning was because what a bit of what kind of like, again, it's like poetry, it rhymes, as George Lucas would say. There was this whole thing with the prophets and the covenant where they learned that humans, were the true, like, the forerunners in them were tight, or were supposed to be. And they hid that fact and caused a holy war against all of humanity. And very much like the past, forerunners were upholding the mantle that the precursors originally had. But then they realized that the precursors didn't deem them worthy, and that they were going to give it to humanity, or to some other species. And that wasn't okay with them. So the Forerunners killed them. Killed off most of them. And the Flood was their revenge. But it was still always a plan for humanity to uphold the mantle. What if... And again, there's still some questions arising because of Halo Infinite. Are the Endless actually, uh, precursors? We don't know. We don't have all the information we need. But this book seems to suggest that perhaps the Forerunner, or the precursors, in some sort of other realm or dimension, are still around, influencing people and events in some way, shape, or form, and have always been. Which then you think about Halo and how Cortana says she picked Master Chief because he's lucky. Is he lucky? Or is he having help behind the scenes? Don't know. But it was interesting, nonetheless. Does it amount to anything in Halo Infinite? Again, no. Will it matter in the future? Well, we'll have to wait to find out. But it is interesting nonetheless. And again, like I said, Halo Outcasts overall was a bright spot on what has otherwise been a continual disappointment in the franchise. So I rather enjoy this one immensely, and I would actually recommend it to pretty much everyone. I think it's really fun. It's really fast-paced, really engaging. I finished it in a single day. So I think it's well worth your time. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Next, we have Rubicon Protocol. So you can feel bad about all the people you find dead in the actual Halo Infinite game. But yeah, so that's up next. Then Infinite itself, Epitaph, and we're done, baby. Listen till a new book comes out, which I think comes out in February 2025, which by now we're past February, but still, as for you, I'm here now. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and let's finish the fight together. See you next time.